And tonight, breaking news out of Baltimore as 6 police officers have been indicted for the death of Freddie Gray. Meanwhile, violence in Baltimore has spiked. The question is why? Grover Norquist joins the show to discuss a new tax plan currently being cooked up in Oregon. Democrats in Iowa are having a hard time naming Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's accomplishments. And finally, Letterman leaves them cheering during his final broadcast. We talk about all that, plus much more in Yay and Nay. This is The Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And tonight on The Wrap, some familiar faces. My co-host and Sirius XM radio star, Rick Unger, is back.
Back with the star
spry,
thing.
yes.
Like
to
that.
his right, Philly attorney and America's pundit, she is Heather Hansen. And finally, he's an author, spiritual leader, and editor of the Wisdom Daily. Brad Hirschfield is back as well. Okay, everybody, let's get right to the Daily Download. And in 2016 campaign news, Hillary Clinton returns to the first in-the-nation primary state of New Hampshire tomorrow. She might want to consider returning to Iowa. That's because her supporters there couldn't point to any of her accomplishments as Secretary of State.
I really can't name anything off the top of my head.
Give me a minute. Give me 2 minutes to go someplace else.
Okay, Christina, can you think of something that she accomplished as Secretary of State that impressed you or thinks important?
No.
Heard a couple of crickets, amazingly enough, in that. Boy, that was tough to put that woman on the spot. Painful to watch, no doubt. Not one supporter, as you saw, can name any accomplishments. And while that may be shocking, the Washington Post notes that it's not that unusual for voters to be unable to recite a politician's track record. Rick, could this be a problem for Hillary Clinton?
Absolutely not. And not only is it not unusual to not know a politician's track record, they don't know anything that a Secretary of State does. However, I do, because I'm getting a little bit tired of this narrative that started with this, and I brought a few fun facts.
Okay.
Things that Hillary did as Secretary of State, I wrote them down, I hope you don't mind.
Not at all.
She was personally responsible for establishing the coalition that made the Iranian sanctions effective. She put all those countries together. Secondly, she negotiated the Russian-U.S. nuclear reduction under the New START provisions. She's the one who obtained the armistice in the 2012 Gaza-Israeli conflict. She substantially, well, this is the one where people argue. According to polls taken around the world by respected pollsters, she single-handedly improved the way we were viewed after the previous administration. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Can anybody here list even 1 or 2 of the accomplishments of General Powell or Condi Rice, who both of which I thought were perfectly good secretaries of state?
Sure.
What did they do?
Powell, you can go with the Iraq War again.
No, as a general, not as
As a Secretary of State.
not as right. And
was that an
both.
accomplishment?
Yes, and here's why. Because he conducted himself with relative honesty and transparency. He reached the wrong conclusion. But I think your point is well taken. But I want to add to it, Rick. You are the same wise pundit who walked in a couple of weeks ago, having been asked that question at another network.
I was.
And you said, I really can't think of anything.
And it's because I couldn't.
And I think it
That's
points.
right.
It's
Which
not
is
playing
what-
gotcha.
it's
I think
true.
it points to the insight of your
It's
first
why
point.
I went and studied.
It's not the individual accomplishments. Maybe it should be, and maybe this should be a problem for her. And there may be a lot of us who wish it would be a problem for her. But if we're going to answer your question, Joe, is it likely to be a problem in the election? For better or worse, the answer is no.
And that's correct, because at the end of that town hall, they actually asked one guy, they said, well, if you can't name anything, then why would you vote for her? He said, well, Scott Walker's going to break up the unions, and I'm in a union, and she's accomplished a lot. I can't name them, but I know she's accomplished a lot. In other words, she was Secretary of State and she was a senator.
Right.
What she did isn't unimportant. That she held those positions seems to be good enough.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And I think also people aren't that interested, even in the accomplishments that you just named. They are more interested in how am I going to bring some money home and feed my kids? How am I going to make sure that there's no terrorists coming into my neighborhood? That stuff isn't all that important
You're
in
right.
this election.
You're absolutely right. In fact, most people, even having heard that list, are going, huh?
Who cares?
What was that?
It's already gone. It's
Right.
gone.
It's
Even though it's
gone.
real stuff.
That's right.
It's gone.
And that's the whole thing. You're a respected pundit. You've been doing this forever. You have a column. All you do is eat and breathe politics. Yet
And
You had to
Sean
look it up.
Hannity tripped me up when he asked me the question. He did.
Well, he knows ninja, so it could have been worse. Anyway, billionaire Donald Trump says he'll announce sometime next month whether he'll run for president. He's showing some signs he's making a serious run this time. Mr. Trump has hired campaign staff in Iowa and in South Carolina. And he's been making lots of media appearances where he's taken some shots at potential rivals because he's never done that before. Here's what he said about Jeb Bush on Fox last night.
I think he's a reluctant warrior. I think he doesn't want to be running. I don't know why he's running. He looks unhappy. He looks like he just doesn't want to be there.
Donald looks very happy in that clip.
And that's exactly why he probably shouldn't be running. A case was once made by a couple of philosophers that by definition, anyone who really wanted the job wasn't fit to be president. Right. So I think actually Donald Trump just gave a ringing endorsement to Jeb Bush, who's willing to run for this office and do it well if he gets elected, but not because he's in love with himself as president, unlike the Donald.
May I play contrarian?
Sure.
Okay, so he didn't hire a staff last time at all for Iowa, for South Carolina,
right.
So maybe that makes him look more serious. And also, people do like his candor. He does get the speech at CPAC. He can get any interview he wants because he rates,
Right.
because he
Yeah.
will say something interesting, and he's unfiltered.
Right.
So is he like a Chris Christie with better hair?
No. People like to listen to
Well, not better, more.
Okay, there's so much wrong with that.
No way with
Never heard
better
him
hair.
describe-
But
Yeah.
go with the substance of the
More interesting
question.
hair. Listen, I
Well,
mean,
the hairline is low. I mean, that's something to be proud of at 64 or whatever he is, right?
well, there was that whole SNL thing about whether or not if he ran, how much that would increase ratings. People like to listen to him talk. Nobody wants to be led by him.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. And I think that in many ways he's going to. We talked about this a little bit before, and since then I've decided he's going to make this worse because he's going to be making points that are taking the conversations away from where they should be.
So the question is why, if he did run?
Well, I actually,
Ego?
for the first time, I think he is going to run. I
think so,
actually do. I believe him this time. Why? Because a couple of reasons. One, I'm sure he's smarting that people like us sit here and make fun of him pretending he's going to run.
I'll show you.
So now he's going to show us. That's number one. Number two, his show's not back on this year. And number three, what better way to keep yourself in the public eye? And Donald lives for the public eye than to actually run for president.
So the beast gets hungrier the more you
Yeah,
feed
of course,
it.
he's not going to make it into the debate, so that's going to be a problem for him.
He actually polled well last time when he was thinking of
Yeah,
running.
I don't
right?
think he'll poll well enough in this group.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
He
certainly
might.
a lot of competition, no question about it. Anyway, the first 2016 presidential debate will be held August 6th, mark your calendars, in Ohio. Looks like a little home state advantage for one guy who'll probably be running. Fox News is moderating the debate, and they say they will limit the participants to a number of, anybody want to guess? 10. Okay. The field of 2016 Republicans could approach 20 candidates. And Fox says the top 10 candidates in the most recent polls will be invited to the stage. Fox says the Republican National Committee approved the decision, but party elder Newt Gingrich says there ought to be a way for all legitimate candidates to debate. So, Heather, is this the right call for Fox?
I think it is. I mean, I would love to hear from all of them, but to hear from all of them at once, I think is a little bit much. There's
Right.
a great article in today's Wall Street Journal by Daniel Henninger talking about having a series of smaller debates where they can go off against each other. We can hear their real ideas, and they actually have time to discuss them. And then somehow, I think we talked about this in the show before about brackets.
Yeah.
Somehow, then bring it back
March
to the
Madness.
survival
That
of the
would be tremendous.
fittest. I mean, that really is going to make people best able to
It's-
deal with Hillary.
It's so like Newt Gingrich to say, this is not good, and then stop.
right.
Right. Well,
What's the solution?
maybe he'll run. Maybe he's not happy at
God
CNN.
forbid
Since
he
everyone
should
else
tell
seems
us
to
how to
be
do
good.
it, right?
Yeah, I just think that the arbitrary nature of 10 is misguided. You do have to limit it for that reason. Oh, you can have just sound bites. I would have preferred them to set a threshold, whether it's 2%, 3%, 5%, and then if it turns out that that's fewer than 10, great. It's not going to be more than 10. I think there's something, don't be arbitrary. If you capture the public attention at a certain threshold, you're in. If you don't, I think Henninger's right. Find some other format so we can't hear from those people.
What, and I'm putting you on the spot here, what candidate who has a big name or somewhat big name you think will not make the cut?
Does Santorum count as a big name?
That's who I was going to say.
He's already spoken today and said that he thinks it's unfair.
He won't
He
make
and
the cut.
Kasich are tied, I think, for just barely making the cut if
He's
he
not gonna
went
make
right
it.
now.
Wait till Kasich announces.
I was going to say Santorum too. I have to say he is. I mean, he is a big name because he actually won a
Won the
number of
right?
primaries.
Iowa.
yes, basically
4
for the
years
second
ago.
last
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Right. So
He's the most disingenuous candidate in the bunch, but he is a big name. But he won't make the
Okay,
cut.
the money is on Santorum. Coming up next, Grover Norquist joins us to talk about a new tax plan being hatched in Oregon. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. Thanks for being here.